And we may not always agree politically, but he is a good friend of mine. Phoning in from far western Maryland, the man who served as special counsel to President Bill Clinton, our good friend Lanny Davis. Lanny, welcome to America's Forum.
Congressman, thank you for having me on, and it's fitting that I should be in the most red Republican county, and there is one in Maryland, Garrett County, Maryland. I'm sorry I can't be there in person.
Well, it's okay. It's good to have you, Lanny, and we do appreciate the fact, at least I do, that Maryland elected a Republican governor during the midterms, but that's another subject. Let's talk now about the legacy of Mario Cuomo. There were so many people who wanted him to run for president, and the sobriquet Hamlet on the Hudson was used by both disappointed supporters and detractors. How do you remember Mario Cuomo today?
Well, in the brief time that we have, I could really speak for a long time, since I grew up in New Jersey following Mario Cuomo's career when he first ran for mayor that far back, and I actually volunteered and got to know him as he became governor, and after his governorship, I got to know him even better. I almost considered him, if not a father figure, then certainly an older brother figure in my life. So we start out with my personal love for the man. I also want to get the message through, and I'm writing something on this, that he was a man of the center, even though he is the inspiration, like Ted Kennedy, of the classic liberal base of the Democratic Party, to the same extent that Ronald Reagan is the hero of the Republican base as a conservative. While Mario Cuomo was a great liberal, and proudly so, and gave one of the great speeches in the history of Democratic conventions in 1984, I do think that people miss something that I'd really like to tell you about, which, in brief, that when he was out of office, Mario Cuomo was somebody who yearned for the great center of American politics to reassert itself. He never gave up his liberalism, but he did believe in reaching across the aisle and finding solutions. And I had a personal experience with him involving a book that I wrote in which I saw that quality. And that's really the message for the day, is it's not just the great inspirational liberal, but the great centrist, in the sense that he wanted solutions and knew he needed Republicans as he served as governor, as well as in national politics. For there to be real solutions, they had to be bipartisan.
What could politicians today learn from him? You know, as we're hearing about, Obama saying how much he admired him and would read his speeches over and over again. At the same time, Obama says he's dusting off that veto pen with Republicans taking over the Senate. So what could we learn from this man?
Well, look, there's a very important point you just made, and I heard J.D. Interviewing the great admiral about with the Republican Congress, there are things that can be done. The veto pen is part of our system of government. Every Republican president used it when there were Democrats dominating the Congress, and it requires bipartisan solutions. Then there's no need for a veto. And those bipartisan solutions are available if the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate and the president, and it's a two-way street, sit down at a table and they say, okay, we both know what we want. Now what do we have to compromise on in order to get most of what we want? And that's what Mario Cuomo was able to do as 2 terms of governor and as a great liberal leader. And the answer to your question is, be faithful to your ideology, to your base, to your values, but then be willing to reach across the aisle, across the divide, to look for solutions and compromise.
Well, Governor Cuomo also said that campaigning was poetry and governing was prose. Let's go back and listen to a portion of his speech at the 1984 Democratic National Convention in San Francisco, and then we'll get your reaction to it.
In fact, Mr. President, this is a nation Mr. President, you ought to know that this nation is more a tale of 2 cities than it is just a shining city on a hill.
So he took the fight to the great communicator and proved his bona fides as a communicator in his own right. We cannot ignore the fact that he was a partisan warrior, no matter the the retrospect and almost the revision of sitting down at the table and pounding out agreements, which is the give and take of governing. He was a spectacular partisan in his own right.
No doubt. He was my inspiration as a fighting liberal, which I still, from my father's FDR instructions, I still am to this day. But remember, Ronald Reagan, who over the years has really become in high regard by both Democrats and Republicans for him remaining faithful to his principles of conservatism. But he did his deals upstairs in the residence with Tip O'Neill, the great liberal, because he knew that to govern America, he had to compromise. He raised taxes, as you know, to the, I think, chagrin of a lot of Republicans. He solved Social Security by raising taxes and by getting Tip O'Neill to cut back on some benefits, and he knew how to compromise, even though he was a fighting and great inspirational conservative, and that's what I would describe Mario Cuomo as, a great liberal who knew how to compromise.
Well, let's talk about the other kind of compromise personally, because within the Democratic Party, he and Ed Koch had a huge battle back in '82. It got to be bitter. Got about a minute. Can you give us personal insights into the race?
Thank you, J.D. So I wrote a book. The subtitle was How Gotcha Politics is Destroying America. I'd gotten to know Ed Koch as a revisionist Democrat, critical of the Democratic Party. And, of course, Mario Cuomo, my inspiration and my friend. And I had the idea, why not invite both of them to co-chair a book party in New York City? And they both agreed. And despite what I thought was going to be a difficulty where they wouldn't talk to one another because they were extremely angry, they both took the podium and they both shook hands and said it's time to come together as a country. And that, to me, was both Mario Cuomo and Ed Koch at their very best.
And to think it was Lanny Davis at his book party displaying that political genius to bring them together. Lanny, as always, we appreciate that. And even for those times when on other shows we might have engaged in gotcha, I'm so glad we got you as a guest today to remember Mario Cuomo. Thanks so much for your time.
Honored to be on your program, J.D. Thanks for the invite.
Take good care. More on America's Forum following this Newsmax Now update.